They thought she was lost. They thought she was confused. They thought that a black woman standing in the lobby of a federal government building in Ottawa on a Tuesday afternoon, holding a manila envelope and asking for the deputy minister's office, was somehow a problem that needed to be managed rather than a person who needed to be helped. They were wrong. And what happened in the next 47 minutes would cost 2 people their careers, expose a systemic rot inside one of Canada's most respected institutions, and send a message that echoed all the way to the minister's desk. Warrant Officer Josephine Tambwe-Okafor had served 14 years with the Canadian Armed Forces, 14 years of early mornings and late nights, of deployments to Mali and Latvia, of field promotions and commendations that she kept in a shoebox under her bed, not because she was ashamed of them, but because she had never been the kind of person who needed them on display. She was 41 years old. She wore civilian clothes that day, a dark burgundy blazer, pressed trousers, low heeled. She carried herself the way soldiers carry themselves even when they are not in uniform, with a stillness that most people mistake for passivity and only learn too late is something else entirely. She was at the Fontaine Hargreaves Government Services building on Spark Street not as a soldier. She was there as a daughter. Her father, retired Master Corporal Edouard Tambwe, 73 years old, had been waiting 11 months for a disability benefits review that had stalled somewhere inside the bureaucratic machinery of Veterans Affairs Canada. 11 months. The man had served 22 years. He had a hearing loss in his left ear from an artillery exercise in Wainwright in 1989, and a knee that had been rebuilt twice from injuries sustained during a peacekeeping mission in Cyprus. He was not asking for anything he had not earned with his body and his time. Josephine had taken a day of personal leave from her base in Ottawa to come down and sort it out in person, because 3 phone calls and 2 written appeals had produced nothing but automated responses and a single letter addressed to the wrong postal code. The lobby of the Fontaine Hargreaves building was the kind of space designed to make you feel small. High ceilings, cold marble floors, a security desk positioned in the dead center like a checkpoint at a border crossing. There were 2 guards on duty. One was a young man with a trainee lanyard who kept looking at his phone. The other was a heavy-set man in his late 50s with a name tag that read G. Faulkner, Security Supervisor. Faulkner looked up when Josephine walked through the glass doors. He looked at her the way some men look at things they have already decided are out of place. She walked to the desk directly. She had her identification ready. Her federal government visitor pre-registration confirmation printed on paper, her driver's license and her CAF identification card, which she had brought as supplemental ID even though it was not technically required. "Good afternoon," she said. "I have a 2:15 appointment with the Office of Deputy Minister Arsenal. My name is Josephine Tambwe-Okafor. I'm pre-registered." Faulkner didn't reach for his keyboard right away. He looked at the envelope in her hand. He looked at her blazer. He looked at her face. "You have an appointment," he said. It was not a question. It had the texture of skepticism dressed up as repetition. "Yes, confirmed by email this morning. Reference number is on the form." She slid the printed confirmation across the desk. Faulkner glanced at it without picking it up. "Who did you say you're here to see?" "Deputy Minister Arsenal's office, specifically Senior Policy Advisor Claire Nadon. It's regarding a veterans benefits file." "And who are you exactly?" The question landed with a particular kind of weight, not "what is your name?" Not "can I see your ID?" "Who are you exactly?" As if the answer she had already given was insufficient, as if she needed to justify her presence with more than a confirmed appointment and a government-issued piece of paper. "I gave you my name," Josephine said. Her voice did not change. "It's on the confirmation form in front of you." Faulkner picked up the form then, slowly, as if doing her a favor. He typed something into the terminal. He squinted at the screen. "I'm not seeing your name here. The reference number is at the top of the form, TBO 2241. Another pause. The trainee beside him had put his phone away and was now watching with the wide eyes of someone who senses they are witnessing something they will be asked about later. "System slow today," Faulkner said without apology. Josephine waited. She was good at waiting. She had waited through sandstorms in Gao and through bureaucratic silences far colder than this one. 30 seconds passed, a minute. "I'm going to need you to step aside," Faulkner said finally. "I'll have someone come down to verify." "I'm happy to wait," she said, and moved 2 steps to the right. She stood there for 12 minutes. She counted, not out of impatience, but because she knew from experience that details mattered, and she had learned long ago to collect them. During those 12 minutes, she watched Faulkner wave through a man in a suit who said his name once and showed a business card. She watched the trainee badge in a courier without asking for ID. She watched Faulkner make a phone call, hang up and make another. When he came back to her, he was accompanied by a woman Josephine did not recognize, mid-30s, tight expression, a lanyard that identified her as T. Beaulieu, Facilities Coordinator. Mrs. Tambwe, Beaulieu said, mispronouncing the name with a briskness that suggested she had not tried very hard. I understand you're looking for Veterans Affairs? I have an appointment with Deputy Minister Arsenault's office. It was confirmed this morning. Veterans Affairs has a separate intake process. There's a satellite office on Murray Street. Josephine looked at her steadily. I'm not here for intake. I'm here for a confirmed policy meeting regarding an active file. The appointment was made through the Deputy Minister's scheduling office 3 weeks ago. Beaulieu glanced at Faulkner. Something moved between them that was not quite a look and not quite a signal. I don't have you on the internal visitor log, Beaulieu said. Then the internal log is missing an entry, because the confirmation email came from this building's administrative address at 9:47 this morning. Josephine reached into her envelope and produced the printed email. She laid it on the desk beside the first form. Beau looked at the email. She looked at Faulkner again. We'll need to contact the scheduling office to verify. That's fine, Josephine said. I'll wait. It may take some time, if you'd prefer to reschedule. I drove 2.5 hours and took personal leave from my base, Josephine said quietly, clearly. I will wait. The word base landed. Beaulieu's eyes moved to her face with slightly more attention than before. Do you work for D&D? I'm here about my father's veterans file. That's what's on the appointment confirmation. What Josephine did not do in that moment was reach into her envelope and produce her CAF identification. She had it. She had brought it specifically because she had lived long enough to know that sometimes you need it. But she made a deliberate choice to see how far the situation would travel before she needed to use it. It was not pride, it was data collection. She wanted to know exactly what this building's welcome looked like for a black woman, with a confirmed appointment and every piece of correct paperwork. She was finding out. Beaulieu made a call on her cell. The call lasted less than a minute. When she hung up, her expression had shifted, not warmer exactly, but more careful. Someone from the 5th floor will be down shortly, she said. Josephine nodded. Thank you. 8 minutes later, the elevator opened and a woman in her late 40s walked across the marble floor with the purposeful stride of someone who has just been interrupted from something important and is not happy about it. She was tall, silver-haired, carrying a tablet. Her lanyard read Claire Nadon, Senior Policy Advisor, Veterans Affairs Portfolio. Nadon walked past Beaulieu, past Faulkner, and stopped directly in front of Josephine. Warrant Officer Tambwe-Okafor, she said, and the full name was pronounced correctly, precisely, without effort. I am so sorry you've been kept waiting. I was expecting you upstairs 20 minutes ago. She turned to look at Faulkner and Beaulieu with the particular expression of a senior official who is assembling information and finding the picture deeply unpleasant. There was a verification issue, Beaulieu began. Her name was on the log, Nadon said. I sent the update myself at 10 a.m. She looked at Faulkner. Gerald, her pre-registration was in the system, under the reference number she provided. Faulkner said nothing, his jaw was set. I apologize on behalf of this office, Nadon said to Josephine. Please come up. As they moved toward the elevator, Josephine reached into her envelope and removed her CAF identification card. She placed it on the desk as she passed. For your records, she said to Faulkner, her voice perfectly even, in case the name comes up again. Faulkner looked at the card. His face did not move, but something in it did. Something behind the eyes, a recalculation happening in real time. The card carried her rank, her service number, and the insignia of 14 years of military service with the Canadian Armed Forces. She did not wait to watch his expression complete itself. She walked to the elevator. The doors closed. Upstairs, in Claire Nadon's office, with its view over the Ottawa River, its stacks of policy binders, and its single-framed photograph of Nadon, in cold-weather gear somewhere that looked like Yellowknife, the meeting that should have started at 2:15 finally began at 3:02. Josephine set her father's file on the table. 11 months of stalled paperwork, 2 unanswered appeals, 1 misdirected letter. Nadon opened her laptop. Within 4 minutes, Nadon had identified the problem. A clerical error in the case coding system had flagged her father's file as a duplicate and routed it into a suspension queue where it had sat since the previous March. It was not malicious. It was bureaucratic incompetence of the most ordinary grinding kind. The file had been sitting 17 centimeters from resolution for nearly a year. Nadon corrected the coding flag herself, escalated the file to active review status, and sent a priority note to the regional case manager. He should receive written confirmation within 10 business days, Nadon said, and his first retroactive payment within 6 weeks of that, assuming no further complications. Josephine looked at the river through the window. She thought about her father sitting at his kitchen table in Gatineau, with his knee wrapped and his hearing aid in, and his faith in a system that had made him wait 11 months for a piece of paper that took 4 minutes to fix. "Thank you," she said. Nadon said, in a tone that made Josephine look back at her. "Thank him, and I'm sorry it took this long." When Josephine came back through the lobby 45 minutes after she had been told to step aside, the dynamic of the space had rearranged itself in ways that were invisible but absolute. Faulkner was still at the desk. He looked at her as she crossed the lobby. She did not look away, and she did not look through him. She looked at him directly, briefly, and then walked through the glass doors without breaking stride. Outside on Spark Street, the October air had a bite to it. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment, adjusting the strap of her bag. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from her father. "Thinking of you, ma petite. Thank you for going." She typed back, "Presque fini, papa, almost done." She did not know then that Claire Nadon had, in the 45 minutes following the meeting, filed a formal incident report regarding the lobby delay. She did not know that the report cited the visitor log discrepancy, the failure to notify the scheduling office of a delay, and what Nadon described in writing as a pattern of selective verification that warranted review. She did not know that Facilities Coordinator Beaulieu, when interviewed by the building's Human Resources Office the following week, would be unable to explain why the standard visitor processing that was completed in under 60 seconds for others had taken nearly 40 minutes for a pre-registered visitor with 3 forms of documentation. She did not know that Gerald Faulkner, whose personnel file already contained 2 prior notations regarding conduct complaints, would be placed on administrative leave pending a formal review that would ultimately result in the termination of his contract. She found out later. She found out the way you often find out about the consequences of things, after they have already happened, quietly, through an email from Nadon's office that was professional and brief and contained a sentence that read, "I wanted to ensure you were aware that the concerns raised by your experience have been addressed through appropriate internal channels." She read the email twice. She thought about what it means for a system to correct itself, not only when the person it wrongs turns out to carry a badge or a rank or a title, but because someone in that system decided that what happened was simply not acceptable, full stop. She thought about all the people who walk through that lobby without a CAF card in their envelope, without a senior policy advisor waiting upstairs, without the particular kind of preparation that comes from 14 years of learning how institutions work and how to move through them anyway. She thought about them, and she felt the weight of what they carry, and she hoped that the investigation opened by Nadon's report would do something durable. Something that lasted longer than one man's contract. Her father received his written confirmation 11 days later. His first retroactive payment arrived in his account on a Friday morning in November. He called her when he saw it. She could hear in his voice the particular relief of a man who had been patient for a very long time and had finally been seen. That sound stayed with her. Gerald Faulkner was dismissed from the building's security contract in early December. Facilities Coordinator Beaulieu received a formal reprimand and was removed from the visitor management portfolio. The building's security contractor was required to complete mandatory anti-bias training as a condition of their contract renewal. None of that reversed the 11 months her father waited. None of it gave him back the 3 phone calls he made that went nowhere, or the letter that was sent to the wrong address, or the quiet, grinding indignity of being made to feel like an inconvenience by a system he had given his body to serve. But it was something. And sometimes when the machinery finally moves, something is enough to keep you going. Josephine Tambwe-Okafor went back to Petawawa on a Wednesday. She signed back in at the base, changed into her uniform, and went to the briefing she had been scheduled for since September. No one there knew about the lobby on Spark Street. No one knew about the 12 minutes she stood to the side, or the question, "Who are you?" exactly, or the moment she slid her CAF card across the marble counter of a government building and let it do the work she had for 45 minutes, deliberately declined to ask it to do. She knew, and that in the end was its own kind of currency. There is a version of this story where Warrant Officer Tambwe-Okafor walks back out of those glass doors, having been told the satellite office is on Murray Street and nowhere to go but there, There is a version where her father's file sits in that suspension queue until March of next year. There is a version where Faulkner goes home at the end of his shift having learned nothing, and Beaulieu files no paperwork, and a building full of people who are supposed to serve the public continues operating exactly as it was. That version happens. It happens more than this one does. The difference in this case was one person upstairs who knew what the visitor log said, and decided that what happened in that lobby required an answer, not a shrug. If this story made you feel something, if you've ever watched someone be made to prove themselves twice as hard for half the result, if you've ever been that person yourself, or if you've ever been the one who could have spoken up and didn't, share this with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below. Tell us what you think should happen to institutions that treat some people as problems to be managed and others as guests to be welcomed. The conversation matters. So do subscribe to Voices of Courage because these stories deserve to be heard. I keep thinking about the 12 minutes Josephine stood to the side of that lobby. Not the arrest, not the confrontation, not the moment Claire Nadon stepped off the elevator and said her full name correctly without hesitating, though that moment mattered. It's the 12 minutes I keep coming back to. The standing, the waiting, the quiet decision to hold her ground without making a scene, without reaching for the card in her envelope that would have ended the whole thing in 30 seconds. That choice tells you everything about who she is. There's something most people don't talk about when they discuss stories like this one. They focus on the outcome, the careers ended, the report filed, the father's payment finally arriving in November. And yes, those things matter. They matter enormously. But the outcome was only possible because of what Josephine brought into that lobby before anything happened. She brought 14 years of discipline that taught her how to stay calm when every instinct says to react. She brought the intelligence to understand that how she moved through the situation would determine what the situation revealed. And she brought a kind of integrity that didn't need an audience. She wasn't performing patience for the cameras. She was just being who she actually was. I think about that a lot, about the difference between people who do the right thing when it's easy and people who do it when it costs them something. Josephine could have escalated at minute 3. She had every justification. Instead, she chose to collect information, to remain precise, to let the truth do what truth does when you give it enough room. That's not passivity. That's a particular kind of courage that doesn't announce itself. And then there's Edouard Tambwe, her father, sitting in Gatineau with his wrapped knee and his faith intact after 11 months of waiting. 22 years he gave, the hearing aid, the rebuilt knee, the early mornings and long deployments, all of it. And the system he served misdirected his letter and lost his file in a suspension queue and made him feel like an inconvenience. That weight doesn't disappear because a payment eventually arrives. But what I noticed is that he never stopped trusting his daughter. He texted her that afternoon, "Thinking of you, ma petite, thank you for going." That quiet gratitude, that unbroken relationship between a father and his daughter built on something solid, that's its own kind of answer to the question of how you survive a world that sometimes fails you. What happened to Faulkner and Beaulieu wasn't random. It followed directly from their choices. Not because life is always fair or because institutions always correct themselves. They don't, and we should be honest about that. But because one person upstairs, Claire Nadon, decided that what she saw in that visitor log was unacceptable and that her decision to act on it was non-negotiable. One person with integrity in the right position can change the geometry of an entire situation. That's worth holding on to. I think we underestimate how much the small decisions accumulate. The choice to stay calm, the choice to document, the choice to speak up when you're the one with the authority to make it count. None of those feel dramatic in the moment, but they are the moments that determine everything that comes after. Josephine went back to Petawawa on a Wednesday and signed in and changed into her uniform and went to her briefing. The lobby on Spark Street stayed behind her, but she carried what it taught her, and now it's here, and maybe it teaches something to whoever is reading this too.